In modern American society, we make much of the difference and the distinction between church and state. We try to keep our religion out of our politics. We try to keep our religious institutions separate from our governmental institutions. But in Jesus' day and time, religion and politics were intertwined. Those who had religious power had political power, and those who had political power held religious power. So today we're going to take a deeper dive into the power structure that existed in the Roman colonies and provinces, with a special emphasis on the city of Jerusalem. Join me today on The Way. Let's begin with how the Roman Empire was structured. The Roman Empire was aristocratic. It was ruled by a very small group of people. At the time of Jesus, the empire held a vast amount of territory, which it had conquered with the most powerful military force of its time. But it ruled these territories by setting up a small bureaucracy that would enter into an alliance with the ruling elites of each territory. They didn't rule by democracy, but by brute military force. They kept soldiers in each of the territories as a warning against rebellion. And of course, the empire acquired vast wealth through a system of taxation, rent, and tributes. As far as who actually held power, well, first of all, there was only one single person at the top, the Roman emperor. He was the most powerful person in the empire, of course, and he was believed by the general population to be a god, or one of the gods. In fact, the Romans believed that the gods themselves had willed that Rome rule the world. This is how they understood their place in the world. Now, underneath the emperor were a group we'll call the ruling elite. This is a very small group of people, perhaps never more than 1 or 2% of the population, and they fell into two categories: the Senate, which was based in Rome, and the provincial governors, who were based in each of the territories that Rome occupied. Pontius Pilate was the provincial governor of Judea at the time of Jesus, of course, and he played, as you know, a pivotal role in Jesus' death. Now, underneath the ruling elite is a category of persons called retainers, which made up approximately 5% of the population. These retainers are officials, professional soldiers, judges, administrators, servants of the elite, or what we might call the entourage of the elite. So these are the civil servants who work for Rome and have positions of power over their own sphere of influence. Now, here's a very important thing to note. Priests and religious leaders were part of this retainer class, especially in Jerusalem. This is because the Jewish leaders had to strike a compromise with their Roman occupiers in order to be able to practice their faith. You see, Rome normally forced their conquered subjects to worship the emperor. They imposed their religion on their subjects as well as their state power. But the priests of Judea had convinced Rome that Jews could only worship God, Yahweh, and that to do otherwise would be to contradict their fundamental religious convictions. So the Romans had basically given them a free pass on this point. And furthermore, the Jews were allowed to continue their worship at the temple, to offer sacrifices, and to maintain the hierarchy of the priesthood. But in return, the Jewish religious leaders felt obligated to keep the peace in Jerusalem. They had to be on the lookout for possibilities of revolution and rebellion. And of course, there were financial benefits for being in this retainer class, as well for cooperating with the Roman occupiers. Now, below this retainer class lived the vast majority of the population. 85% of the people in the empire were peasants or artisans, and most of these people just eked out survival on a day-to-day basis. Many were farmers who worked on lands which were owned by rich absentee landlords. There were artisans who sold their items in the marketplace. But it's estimated that as much as 70% of what this population produced in their work was claimed by taxes. So this was not an easy life. And finally, we must not forget the remaining 5 to 10% of the population who were considered degraded or expendable. These were those who were disabled or sick, deformed, criminals, people who could really only survive by begging in the streets. So we need to keep all of this in mind as we now turn our attention to the 3 parables which Jesus tells in Matthew chapter 21 and 22. First of all, we might ask, well, what social class does Jesus and his disciples fit into? They obviously fit into that large group, the mass of people, the general population who are peasants and artisans. The disciples were fishermen, and they were people who struggled to survive and to live from day to day. But then what about the people whom Jesus is addressing, the chief priests, the scribes, the elders, the Pharisees? Well, the answer is a little bit tricky. We do know that the chief priests and the elders certainly belonged in that retainer class. They were a part of the ruling elite, but not the Pharisees. The Pharisees in Jesus' day and time were actually a small minority religious sect who focused most of their attention on public and private piety. However, after the destruction of the temple, in the time that Matthew wrote his gospel, the Pharisees had become the dominant religious group and were attempting to formulate the future of Judaism itself. These 3 parables then are an anti-establishment attack on the religious institutions of the time, both of Jesus' time and of Matthew's time, and also perhaps even our time. So as you read these 3 parables, I want you to spend some time wrestling with them. Try to determine, who do the various characters represent? What is the point of this parable? What point is Jesus making? And throughout it all, continue to ask the question, how does this parable question authority? How does this parable challenge the existing establishment and that establishment's power? Have fun, and I'll see you next time on The Way.